I'm Connor Old, and welcome to a bonus episode of Old's Oscar Countdown. We just had a video on Monday discussing the Golden Globe nominations, but now today the Critics' Choice nominations came out, so I decided, you know what, let's do a bonus episode reacting just quickly to three of the biggest surprises from Critics' Choice, the nominations, and what they mean for the future of the Oscars. Not as surprising as I would have liked. They're very predictive of what we thought were the main contenders going into the Oscars, but I do think it's an interesting snapshot of what particularly the American type Academy member voters may be thinking. But if you're new to this channel, please subscribe. Every single week we talk about a different Oscar category and we do a deep dive and try to figure out what's going to get nominated, as well as a lot of these bonus episodes and predicting. Eventually I'll predict the Critics' Choice winners and then react to those winners, and then all the other award shows ultimately leading up, counting down to the Oscars being that big one. So let me know in the comments down below your thoughts on the Critics' Choice Award nominations, whether you liked them or not. Were you surprised by any of the nominations? This is an interesting awards body because unlike the Golden Globes, they also do technical categories like Best Score and Cinematography and things like that. So that is sort of the very first precursor we get this award show of those categories. So I'll be talking a little bit about that in general, but for me, I just wanted to break down the video into these three sort of big surprises, as these three sort of big talking points of some of the movies that overperformed or underperformed. And the big sort of surprise, I think, of Critics' Choice nominations morning was that Barbie overperformed. It got a record-breaking 18 nominations in the Critics' Choice Awards, which is huge. It was nominated in pretty much every category. I don't think there were a lot of people that had it getting in America Ferrera for Best Supporting Actress, but then also cinematography, but then also editing, but then also all three of the songs. It really did overperform. So I think we can take away a couple things from this overperformance of nominations. The first one, I think, is that the obvious one. Barbie is a lot stronger than even someone like myself had to believe. I had a little bit of concern earlier on in the season as to how serious of a contender this movie is. Is it really going to get both technical and above the line? Will the Oscars really like this comedy? They don't really like comedies in the past, particularly, very traditional studio comedies like this. But they, at least with the critics, they have been really resonating with the movie, and while I'm not exactly confident it's going to get in for cinematography or all three songs or America Ferrera for Best Supporting Actress, it does indicate that there is a general support for the film, so that in a weird way, I don't think that cinematography is going to happen for the Oscars. But the fact that it got a cinematography nomination here indicates to me that Greta Gerwig is a pretty strong sign for a Best Director nomination. Or even something like editing. It got in for editing here. And oftentimes the editing award at the Oscars has to do with what are the top 5 movies, not necessarily what are the best edited movies of the year. They're oftentimes a sign of strength for a movie. So the fact that Barbie overperformed so well at this award show and got in for editing, that actually makes me more confident to predict it at the Oscars. So there are a couple categories that Barbie benefits from, even though I don't think it's going to repeat for the same amount of nominations at the Oscars. That's one way sort of to look at it, and the main thing I think you should be taking away from the nominations. But the other thing that I think you should also consider, and the thing that I sort of immediately thought of was, is there going to be a bit of a backlash to Barbie now? The Oscar season is all about these ebbs and flows, these celebrations, and then something gets a little bit too high and too much praise, and then we sort of knock it down, and then we pick something else to boost it back up. It's not uncommon for the movie that gets the most amount of Critics' Choice nominations to sort of underperform in future award shows. If you look at movies like The Irishman, which had about 15 nominations, in 2019, The Favourite in 2018 had 14 nominations. Belfast and West Side Story tied for the most amount of Critics' Choice nominations in 21 with about 11 or 12 each. Every time, those movies, Irishman, Favourite, they got 14 nominations at Critics' Choice, they ended up getting less nominations at the Oscars. So it is notable that the movies that get the most amount of nominations oftentimes either don't win Best Picture or don't get the same amount of nominations at the Oscars. And that may be due to the fact that they're sort of the frontrunners at the time, or they get a lot of love and appreciation from this awards group, so that the Oscars feel they want to do something different and want to be their own group and decide, okay, well, I got a lot of love at Critics' Choice. It's, the movie that everyone else is going to nominate, but I secretly like this performance, and then I nominate it. And we see this oftentimes with the Oscars. They do like to go their own way, different than what the other awards groups do. And I think, in a way, they're influenced by what the other groups have already nominated, and they want to nominate something different. So we have to keep in mind that there may be a bit of a Barbie backlash because of how many nominations it did and how it got and how well it's been doing. That doesn't necessarily guarantee it's going to translate with the Oscars. But I think the overall sort of message we take away from the film and this amount of nominations is that it is a strong film, a strong Best Picture contender, and it should get a lot of nominations come Oscar morning. Then the second surprise that I want to talk about for the Critics' Choice nominations is the overperformance of May December. I was one of the first people early on in the season, and I predicted Charles Melton to get nominated for May December. I saw that coming, and now everyone's on the train with me. But I will say I'm surprised. I didn't necessarily think Julianne Moore was going to get nominated for May December. And the fact that she got nominated here as well as in Golden Globes and the overall performance of the film, it does seem like she's more and more likely to get that nomination for Best Supporting Actress. And then you look at a category like Best Original Screenplay. The fact that this movie got in for that category and a movie like Saltburn, which got in for Best Picture, didn't get in for Screenplay, is almost a testament to May December's screenplay and its chances for the Oscars, because it's so well beloved as an original screenplay that it got in for Screenplay even though it didn't get in for overall for Picture. Now, what it really did help me clear up though is what are the top 8 Best Picture contenders in this season. And I think right now we're starting to really sort of get a clear picture of what the top contenders are. We're talking about Oppenheimer, Barbie, Poor Things, The Holdovers, Past Lives, Maestro, American Fiction, and Killers of the Flower Moon. Those are sort of the top 8 that I'm confident right now they'll get in. They've been getting in everywhere. Those are sort of the main contenders. And then I think we have right now 3 movies competing for those final 2 slots. So we have The Zone of Interest, Anatomy of a Fall, and May December is really sort of that third one, because I look at a movie like The Color Purple, the fact that it didn't get in for someone like Fantasia Barrino, or didn't get in for production design, or Taraji P. Henson. Yes, it got in for picture, but I think overall actually disappointed at Critics' Choice, and then also disappointed at the Globes and AFI and National Board of Review. So I've sort of gotten The Color Purple out of my predictions. It doesn't seem like it's a strong enough film. Then you have a movie like Saltburn, which got in for picture here, yes, but didn't get in at the Golden Globes and didn't get any acting nominations here and didn't get in for screenplay. So it feels like overall just a weaker contender. It got in for some technical nominations, but I don't think the technical craft of the film is going to be strong enough or showy enough to get Oscar nominations. So I feel like Saltburn's not really in the contention. Air, you could maybe say, but the fact that Viola Davis didn't get in for Best Supporting Actress, I think hurts that movie's chances, and it doesn't have any performances to sort of go forward, and it's really just like a screenplay editing kind of a movie. So I think Air is still maybe a movie that gets no nominations at the Oscars. And then maybe a movie like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse was a contender. I don't think that's a contender anymore. It really needed to get a picture nomination here at the Critics' Choice Awards. That's the sort of kind of group that would appreciate and support that kind of a movie. So the fact that it didn't get in for picture, I think ultimately hurts its Oscar chances. So for me, those final 3 spots those final 2 spots are between those final 3 movies. And a week ago, May December really wasn't a serious contender for Best Picture in my mind. Now it definitely is. But I think ultimately, if I were to sort of put in those final 2 slots, I would give it to Anatomy of a Fall and The Zone of Interest, even though they disappointed both those films in this nominations this morning and for this group. I'm not concerned at all, because if you just look at last year, Triangle of Sadness got 1 nomination, All Quiet on the Western Front got 1 nomination. So 2 nominations at Critics' Choice, 12 nominations combined at the Oscars. It got Triangle of Sadness and All Quiet on the Western Front got in for Best Picture, as well as a plethora of other big nominations, screenplays, directors, what have you. So it's indicative that, even something like Drive My Car back in 2021 it got 1 nomination at Critics' Choice, and then ultimately got nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars, because the Oscars and the Academy is a more international branch rather than the Critics' Choice group. They're mostly American critics. So I'm not surprised to see Anatomy of a Fall and Zone of Interest sort of disappoint at this awards group. I'm not concerned really at all of their chances for the Oscars. So they're still for me in those final two slots, but I still want to give credit to May December because it did get those nominations this morning, and it did start to really build a campaign. But then there's certain things that go against May December, the fact that it's not Netflix's main priority, the fact that other Todd Haynes movies don't get in for picture, but they get in for screenplay and performances. Carol, I think, got 6 nominations without getting a Best Picture nomination. Same thing with Far From Heaven, which got 4 Oscar nominations without a picture nomination. So it's a bit of a Todd Haynes thing to not get it in for picture and to get in for some of the other categories. So right now I'm actually kind of somewhat confident in those 10 predictions for those 10 slots for Best Picture. And I don't think you should be scared off of predicting a movie like Anatomy of a Fall or The Zone of Interest in your picture top 10 lineup. And then the other third biggest surprise for the Critics' Choice Awards this morning was that Past Lives sort of underperformed. A couple of years ago, the Critics' Choice really sort of championed indie movies. And even something like last year, I think their support of Everything Everywhere All at Once was a sign for other Oscar voters to go, hey, this is a serious contender, this is a big movie, it's not The Fabelmans, it is Everything Everywhere All at Once. And it sort of gave people the permission to reward it in some of those categories. And we've seen this with the critics group in the past, where they've sort of started campaigns early on for these actors who maybe we initially didn't think would be contending. Someone like Maria Bakalova for Borat 2, or even the whole First Reformed Love back in 2018, which eventually got Paul Schrader his first nomination for Best Screenplay. This group, I think, sort of had some sort of indie darlings and critical favorites that really pushed for. And Past Lives is a classic example of that. It was released earlier in the year. It's seen by a lot of people. One of the highest critically beloved movies of the year. A lot of top 10 lists. So the fact that Celine Song didn't get in for Best Director, the fact that we didn't get a surprise John Magaro nomination in Best Supporting Actor, I think really sort of overall hurt the film. And in a way, it's not that in your face. It's a little bit more subtle. I think it's still going to be a fine movie. I think it's going to get nominated for Best Picture. I think it's going to get nominated for Screenplay. But I do think overall it is a sign of weakness for the film that in an expanded 6 directors, it couldn't get in. It couldn't get in some of these acting categories. Even something like Best Score. I mean, it's a really sort of traditional, engaging piano score that's an easy listen. So you would think it maybe would get in for score. It didn't get in for score either. And because, an awards group like this that would normally sort of support an independent movie like this and show a lot of support for it, because this group has become so interested in predicting the Oscars, that they've sort of abandoned some of their independent roots, and they're sort of lifting up of some smaller films with nominations. We're going to see movies like Past Lives, which maybe in one universe could have won Best Picture with a lot of support from these critical groups, seems like more so a fringe kind of a Best Picture nominee, but not really a serious contender, which is kind of unfortunate because you would see the Critics' Choice Awards do that kind of stuff in the past. So really, it's just a bit of a bummer, that's all. But those are sort of the 3 big surprises from the Critics' Choice nominations. There are some smaller sort of technical stuff too that were interesting, like a J&T Yates nomination for Napoleon for Best Costume Design, Daniel Pemberton getting in for Best Score for Across the Spider-Verse, which I think some people thought, oh yeah, of course, he's got in for the Golden Globes. But he always gets in for Golden Globes, Daniel Pemberton. He doesn't always get in for Critics' Choice. He doesn't always get in for the Oscars. So that was interesting to see that this movie and the score is really being celebrated. And it's this movie, it's not a movie like Ferrari, that's Pemberton's sort of big push for a nomination this year. But that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this bonus episode. Stay tuned for Monday's video, where I'm going to be breaking down 3 categories: Best Editing, Best Visual Effects, and Best International Film, and discussing my thoughts and my nominations, what I think could get nominated for those 3 categories. So subscribe to the channel so you don't miss that video. But that's about it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time, stay tuned.